coming to visit with you all. What I did this time, because each time we update on different programs, so what I did this time is I just kind of put some summaries and I put some information on your tables. I have some extras. If you would like to take them with you, then you certainly can. And I have some extras if you don't have an opportunity. So what I'm going to do is just kind of start with some of the things that this group usually as a whole has been interested in. Economic development. I gave you a list of the top 10 employers in the county. As you all know, we have 2 tax abatement economic zones going on right now. The hydroelectric plant, which involves the ETEC, East Texas Electric Cooperative, and TRA. That's a tax abatement. It didn't generate as many jobs as we would like to see, so they got a variance on that because the number of jobs there is only going to be about 2 or 3, and probably one of those will be part-time, mostly maintenance and that kind of thing. However, this does also include on here the Corrigan OSB plant, which is number 11, the top employers in terms of numbers. That's also one of our tax abatements, and it has stabilized at the 165 jobs that was the agreement for the tax abatement, and so it will stay right there. The hydroelectric is still in the process. As you know, they ran into several blips when it came to some of the permitting and the federal government and so forth, not to mention the weather. Harvey kind of ran over us a little bit during the construction phase, so that's been kind of a slow process. If you will notice, one of the things you need to notice is number 2, the second largest employer now in Polk County is the Alabama Coshada tribe and NASCLA combined. So their goal, according to them, is to be the #1 employer in the county. So they're moving up. Okay, to go along with this information, as you all know, the national unemployment rate has been ticking down. Our unemployment rate has also been ticking down. We're making greater gains than we normally would because usually in rural areas you lag behind, and we never have managed to get to the unemployment rate of the state or the national level, the average unemployment rate. However, our unemployment rate has been ticking down. Right now, another group that is not listed on here but that generates a lot of revenue and a lot of income for the county is your state park. Interestingly enough, when I was visiting with Art, all these people that I'm referencing are going to be your programs from this point forward. But the state park reported, like, between March and August, they have had at the park basically between 15,000 to over 19,000 visitors in those months. So that sales tax revenue that comes in, that really is kind of a jewel that the majority of us do not take advantage of. If you have not been out there to see the programs or taken your children, grandchildren, etc. to see some of those programs, they really do an excellent job. I took my grandkids to see the birds of prey, where they actually fly them around, and it was really fascinating. It was really very, very interesting. Okay, at this time, our general fund is healthy. We're back in the healthy mark. We're back in the 3 to 6 months operating. So we're looking good right there. The projects that we have completed was the salary survey. As you know, the compensation for county employees has been pretty low. We have a good, excellent retirement, but we did not have at that time really good compensation. So I also included that information for you. So you have the tax rate history, which obviously our budget is based on. So you have our tax rate history. And then I also included in there the budget information for you to look at and the comparisons. So what happens with the salary survey is you have someone that comes in and evaluates your salaries, and then it kind of makes recommendations. And in our case, our salaries were so skewed that the changes that were recommended was anywhere from a 2.5 change in compensation to over 16% change in compensation. because that's how far out of whack we were in some areas. Some areas we were good, but in some areas we were really, really out of kilter. So we've corrected that. And so if you look at it, you can see the budget comparisons, and you can see, if you look at this page right here that has the graph on the number of employees, okay, the number of employees that the county has at this time, and what the compensation package looks like. If you look at that, you'll see that in FY 2015, which was when I first came in, that is, you will recall, that's when we had the $1.4 million deficit, and we kind of slowed everything down. If anybody retired or resigned, then we didn't fill that spot. So coming into it, 2015, we had 283.46. The way you have it, the 0.46 is someone leaves in between, and that position doesn't get filled for a while. And then we went down in the number of employees to 278 employees, and then we maintained it. So now we are basically back up to our staffing pattern where we should be with the county. And in the meantime, the employee compensation has increased to where we're more competitive. We're never going to be competitive with Montgomery County, or Harris County, so we're always going to have some people that are going to travel, that are going to go for areas where they are compensated more so than they would be in Polk County. And we all know that, we all deal with that. Every single large employer in Polk County deals with that to some degree, that you're competing with them. I will tell you this, if you have a grandchild or you have a child that's interested in going to college, what they really need to consider is being a court reporter. Right now the state of Texas has a huge court reporter shortage, and court reporters in rural areas are making $70,000 plus without a problem. And we are competing. We are having to compete with Nacogdoches County, with Angelina County, with Harris County, with Montgomery County for court reporters. So needless to say, it's not exactly a level playing field in some of these areas. The courthouse restoration, that's one of our positive projects that's going on. We got the planning grant. We were awarded the planning grant by the state. We've moved forward very quickly with that. And we are in line to receive a full restoration grant, which is really exciting for this area because that will allow us to bring more of the county services back into the courthouse instead of just having the courthouse there with minimal services. So that will allow us to bring more services in. The maximum amount that the state will award through the Historical Commission is around $6 million. We've already received one, which is for the planning grant and some of the restoration that was done on the roof. So we would be eligible for $5 million from the state, and the estimate for the total cost is 7 to 8 million. So we would have to come up with the funding for that, and right now things are looking pretty good for that. Another question that I usually get from this group is the detention center, the detention facility. The average out there is right about 75% occupancy. We're still working really, really hard to try to get a minimum guarantee because the vacillation is anywhere from 129 people out there to over 1,000. That's impossible to staff for. How would you ever staff for that kind of swing happening? And so that's been a little bit of a challenge. So we're still working on the minimum guarantee, and hopefully now we're making some traction. If we can get a minimum guarantee, at least they can staff for 500 to 600 and then have temporary employees that they can bring in at different points in time. We finished some of our software updates, so that was a large budget item this year. And we're moving forward. The next round will be our JPs, our clerks, our district attorney's office, everything related to judicial. And then that should get us all in line now with the requirements for the state for e-filing and for all the services that are being provided. We right now with this budget year, we're looking at some options. The volunteer fire departments, not every county is as fortunate as we are. So just like every time you get a chance, you should thank a teacher and you should thank your military and your law enforcement, you should definitely thank a fireman because in our case, they are all volunteers. They are not compensated for that. And so, when you're having to raise money doing bake sales and barbecues to provide a service to the community, then we really should do everything we can to support them. And so we're going to try to increase funding. One of the requests from them was to consider getting a fire marshal for the county that would help with preventive measures and making sure that especially commercial buildings that are built in the outside of the city limits follow fire code. Because the public has an expectation to some degree that if you go into a public building, then that it's safe, right? That if a fire breaks out or something should happen, then you will be able to exit the building. We're also looking at a veterans treatment court. That would be for our veterans. We would do a regional one. That's the only way that it would be possible. So we're planning on teaming up with Trinity County and San Jacinto County, because those are also our district judges positions. And so that is in the process right now. We would apply for a grant on that and try to get something started to provide assistance to our veterans that have gotten in trouble with the justice system, and try to provide some support, especially if the issue is directly related to a diagnosis that's related to combat, like PTSD, anxiety, paranoia, those kinds of things. So hopefully that will also happen. We're also currently evaluating a government phone plan, and what that would allow us to do is have a flat rate instead of having employees and elected officials utilizing their personal phones and then being compensated. What that would allow us to do is actually we would save money for the taxpayers, and at the same time those phone numbers become eligible to be top priority during an emergency. So for example, during Harvey we had some difficulties with communications because you would try to call through cell phones and every circuit was busy. And so what they do is they reserve some lines for emergency personnel, and so that would make employees, especially in law enforcement and emergency management, eligible to have top priority, so that when those emergencies are going on, then they can get through as needed. The handouts that I gave you, if you look at it, okay, I discussed the employee compensation one, and I went ahead and gave you a copy of what our salary survey looks like, what the steps look like now. The reason the salary survey was also important is because if you just do nothing but rely on a 2.5% increase, part of what happens is when you start getting to the top, then the gap gets wider and wider and wider. And so what had happened was our employees that were not has refined the skills, or that were lower in terms of the pay grade, the distance between them and someone else in the same level was just getting beyond possible for them to catch up. The other thing that was happening is that with giving COLAs, then the whole thing moves up. So we had a lot of employees that were still on step one, right, but had been employed by the county for 5, 6, 10 years. And so a new employee coming in was making exactly the same amount of money as they were making. And so by compressing it, right, and doing some adjustments, then that allows you to take and compensate some of those employees that have been employed for a while and put them on step 3, so that they're not on the same step as a new employee that comes in. And that just needed to be adjusted. That was just a long-term issue that had happened. Okay, the other thing I did was I included in here our annual debt issuance, and that's this crazy looking graph that you have. So if you look at it, it corresponds to the information that's on the back page, also on the reverse of the same page. And the reason I included that in there is because even though our debt issuance gets leveled out, so if we issue $1.5 million worth of debt, and then we do not issue a whole lot of debt the following year, then what we are allowed to do is level it out so that your debt payments, so that you don't have a huge debt payment one year and then not much the next year. So if you look at that, again in 2015, which when I first came in, was the $1,060,000 that had already been agreed to. Then we were in the deficit mode at that point. And so then we issued in 2016 $145,000 worth of debt. In FY 2017, we took the back payments from IAH and eliminated our debt. And then now we're getting in the habit of bumping our debt up. And so this year, the debt that got issued was $1,750,000. And there's nothing wrong with debt as long as you have a system for managing it. I don't have a problem with it as long as what we're doing is what is really needed. And so we're hoping to establish some kind of criteria that will level that out to where we're not doing this jumping around in terms of our debt. Because part of what happens, if you look on the back side of that one, part of what happens is that your debt must be paid first. So if your debt is paid first, then what is left is what is left for maintenance and operations or personnel costs or whatever, and for additional projects. So by incurring more debt, if you look at the M&O rate and the debt service rate, then our debt service rate is going up, which means that our M&O rate has to go down. So do you have any questions so far? No? So my last one is, let's talk about the legislature. We all got impacted by the legislature, and they're all talking about the 3.5 and that they're going to, your property taxes are going to go down. That's the promise being made. I'm going to tell you I fought hard against the 3.5 revenue cap, and there was some logic to it. If you've had a 5+% growth, but you're limited to 3.5 revenue cap, will your property taxes go down? Yes, the property taxes are going to go down for those people that have a lot of economic development, a lot of manufacturing, a lot of commercial that will pitch in. In our case, we have economic development going on right now, but we're in the tax abatement period. And so we have not been receiving any revenue, to speak of from those tax abatements. However, we are receiving the damage to our roads, we are receiving the impact that occurs with that economic development. And if you take 3.5 in terms of a county our size, if we give a 2.5, your largest cost is personnel, mostly in most businesses. So if you take a 3.5, then it makes it much more difficult to give a 2.5 cost of living adjustment to your people. So part of what I did was I wrote to our legislators and I broke it down. I took 3 properties, one in Harris County, one in Galveston County, one in Polk County, that all paid approximately $10,000 in property taxes. And so I broke it down, and in Harris County and Galveston, 17% to 22% of that bill went to the county. So the majority of it went to the school. And then in Polk County, out of that $10,000, 35% went to the county and 65% went to the school. So basically what they did was they kicked the can down the road in terms of our schools, because they had taken money out of the rainy day fund to give teachers a raise with no long-term plan for where to go from there. At the same time that they're doing that, they have sent us a mandate that we must pay for all indigent care, we must pay for all mental health assessments, but they're not sure how we're going to do that. But hey, call your regional mental health authority, but oh, by the way, we didn't give them any more money. And so that leaves a tax burden for an unknown variable on us, on the taxpayers, on all of us. So it's just, we're just gonna see how it plays out. I mean, but one of my other arguments was that in Polk County, right now, we have over 500 miles of unpaved road. So to pave 1 mile of road, assuming that it's on semi-decent soil, and we are talking Polk County, right? So obviously not a whole lot of gumbo clay, right? But assuming that it's in reasonable, stable soil, and assuming that it doesn't have a whole lot of culverts in it, then it costs around from $180,000 to $200,000 a mile to pave it. The other side of that is it costs $50,000 a mile to maintain it, and you only have to pay the $50,000 every 5 to 7 years. So obviously, those counties that have already have every road paved don't have the same concerns that we would have in terms of trying to pave roads and create better accessibility for our residents. So there are just some issues that, and I get it, they had a knee-jerk reaction to some of the events and activities that have been going on in larger surrounding counties, but it kind of left the rural counties a little bit in a bind, and so we will work with it and go from there. Because the other thing is, we received our last payment for Ike. And so when you're having to pay your bills, but you're not receiving your money from the federal or state government right away, then it makes it a little bit tricky in terms of balancing your accounts. Okay, any questions? Yes, sir?
Sydney, explain to me why we would give the hydroelectric plant an abatement when they're only going to have 1 to 2 employees. And I don't think they asked for it until after they started the project. They were going to do the project anyway, so why would you give them an abatement?
You give them an abatement because it's going to go on the tax rolls eventually. So eventually it's going to benefit the county and the school districts that are involved.
But it's been on the tax roll right at the beginning. And what is it, 10-year abatement?
It's a 10-year abatement. In their case, it was a 10-10-10, so it was 10% each year for 10 years. One of the things that did happen with the hydroelectric is you have 5 years that you're in enterprise zone, and if you haven't gotten your project done in that period of time, you're supposed to renew your enterprise zone, and that lapsed because someone on their legal counsel dropped the ball somewhere, and so that lapsed, and so they actually did not get a renewal at the zero rate. So there has been a contribution from the hydroelectric, and that's called a variance. So if I come in and I say I'm gonna put in a $100 million project, but I'm only going to create 2 jobs instead of the 10, we request that your project at least create 10 jobs. Given the magnitude of the amount of money, then you want them to be on the tax roll, because at that point in time, that was all government property. We were not receiving any kind of tax revenue, and neither was the school district. So that's why the tax abatement was done. And you have and we're not involved in this, but the school districts also have the capability of doing a 313 agreement, where they are given some monies or compensated for what would have been potential M&O losses, because that's what Corrigan OSB did with Corrigan ISD. They did a 313 agreement, and so they've been receiving monies all along from Corrigan OSB.
So another question. One time there was talk about a solar farm coming in, and they wanted an abatement. They were going to only have 1 employee in the end. Is that still in the making? What I'm saying about abatements, I don't understand why they get abatements if they're going to do it anyway.
No, sir.
I know as a business owner, I never got abatement doing the business.
Yes, sir, and I agree, and to some degree, I agree with you. None of us have ever gotten a tax abatement, but what you do is you're weighing the potential, the outcome of it, and no, the solar panel concept died, and I'll tell you why it died. It died because they came in and they wanted a 10-year abatement, and same thing, it was only going to be 2 or 3 jobs, and so, but upon further review, and in discussion with other county judges, part of what was happening with the solar panel farms, other than being really ugly to look at, was the longevity of the equipment. What you're basing it on is what is it going to be worth at the end of the tax abatement, because that's what's going to generate tax revenue, right? And so if it starts out when it's brand new, well then after 10 years it's going to have some depreciation and the value's not as high, but you're going to weigh what the tax revenue is going to be along with the jobs. So it's a two-pronged situation. With the solar farms, when we reviewed and looked at it and discussed it with some other county judges, the life expectancy of the solar panels is less than 10 years. So I give you a tax abatement, you come in and you put this solar farm up, you don't pay anyone anything, you make money, we get nothing. And so when we discussed it with council and put in some stipulations, then that went away.
The reason I brought it up because Georgetown, Texas, I don't agree with them. Their city got into great debt, probably still are, because they had some kind of solar panel abatement they did somewhere. And they like to say it didn't work out.
Those have not worked out. And so part of it was just due diligence. You know, we just reviewed everything. Now, we did have some landowners that would have benefited pretty seriously from receiving those monies, because they were coming in and offering tremendous amounts of money for the leasing of the land. And so we did have some landowners that would have benefited.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sydney, has there ever been talk of redistricting the precincts? And the reason I ask is, I would think Livingston, a large part of y'all's sales tax revenue and property tax may come from the Livingston area, but yet Livingston really doesn't have representation on the county court the way it's divided up.
The redistricting is going to happen, because when the census comes up, then it's going to happen. And what is potentially the outcome of that will be is that precinct 3, which currently already has most of the dirt roads, is going to get larger. So Milk Purvis is going to have to take in more unpaved roads. So there will have to be some discussion on the court as to how to proceed with that, given the fact that those are more expensive than paved roads are. But yes, because the population growth that is occurring, because it's based on population, the districting of the precincts it's based on population, and the population growth is all occurring around the lake, down 146. See, so those precincts will get smaller, and Milk Purvis will have to take in more. But that's going to happen in the census. There's no way. Because we have a full expectation of probably going over the 50,000 mark. And that makes a difference with the county. When you go over the 50,000 mark, then you fall in a different category than you're no longer considered a small rural. Now you're moving up. In between I-69 and eventually I-14, which is currently 190, then we become the bullseye. I mean, no matter whether you're good with maps or good with geography or not, we're right where the two cross. Now, is that going to impact any of us in here? Maybe the little ones, and they've left. Because that's not going to be a fast process. They may be able to speed up the I-14, mostly because that's your forts to ports. And since that's a military readiness project, then they may be able to speed that up as opposed to I-69. But there's already a push for that.
Sydney, is it a benefit for us to be a small county or a larger county? Is that what you're talking about?
It's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword. In some cases, it is to our advantage, and in some cases, it's not. It is to our advantage to have a completely accurate census. I don't know, in the last census, I don't think that they got a good count And part of why I don't think they got a good count is that my mother-in-law wasn't included in the count. So, and she lives in Enchanted Forest, so I'm like, how did y'all miss Enchanted Forest or anybody in Enchanted Forest, right? So it is to our advantage to receive an accurate count, and the reason that is to our advantage is because a lot of your Medicare monies, your programs for elderly services, social services, indigent healthcare are based on those numbers. They're based on that count. So it doesn't make any difference to me where we fall, as long as we are somewhat accurate so that we're not getting hurt in terms of funding formulas. Another thing that we've done is that up to this point, our aging and social services has been a contract and a long-term contract, and so we are splitting those up now. Ms. Hayes, has been the longtime provider, has decided to retire, and so those will now become county programs. They've always been funded. The aging services is funded through the federal government. That's basically our version of Meals on Wheels, and for our senior citizen center. And so we'll get refunded a lot of those monies. The majority of those monies get refunded back to the county. But those are being split up because the requests and the amount of demand for indigent healthcare, indigent medical, mental assessments, those kinds of things are being shifted from being a state burden to being a county burden. Yes, sir.
What plan does the county have to try to make sure that we do have an accurate count for the census?
We are, when the census, when they first come our direction, we are going to make sure that we sit down with them and have a contact person in our office, that they can reference or at least come to. The other thing we've done is currently our 911 mapping is really, really good. We are in really good shape with our 911 mapping, and so we will be able to hand in the 911 maps that show every residence, every location, every street, how to get there. Our 911 mapping really served us well, and so I have to say kudos to that program and to the emergency management, because that really served us well. We were able to take those maps, hand them to the rescuers that were helping us during Harvey, hand them to the Red Cross, hand them to whoever needed them so that they could go in, evaluate, help people. Center of Hope received maps. You see what I'm saying? Everybody that was involved in Harvey, and we never got a phone call back from anyone saying, I have no idea what you're talking about, because our maps were really, really good, really up to date. And our fire departments utilize them all the time. And so if there is an issue or there is a problem, then we know pretty quickly. So.
Is there anything on the animal shelter, future animal shelter, or is there any, I know you're working on the budget now, is there anything that you think would be included for that?
Great question.
The question was, is there anything on the animal shelter? The animal shelter, as it stands, does not meet the state requirements the way the construction was done. But it does not meet the state requirements for people to come to it. It does meet the requirements for us to be able to house animals in it. So part of it is we went ahead and moved forward with an animal ordinance. And so let me clarify something, because there seems to be a lot of confusion over the animal shelter and over a leash law. There is no leash law in Polk County. It is not a leash law. For us to pass a leash law would require for us to go to the voters, and for the voters to approve a leash law. So what we did was we do have an animal shelter and an animal control ordinance. And what it basically says is you gotta keep control of your animal. The reason being that the number of bites, dog bites, has increased in the county. And we all know what happens if you have several dogs, they develop a pack mentality. Someone's gonna tell me when it's one, right?
Yeah, with
Okay.
respect.
So they develop a pack mentality, and then your normal little friendly little dog in a pack of 7 does not behave like your normal friendly little dog. And so we've had an increase in the number of bites. So what we did is we based it along the same lines as the livestock law and as our ag value. So if you have 10 acres and you want to let your dog wander the 10 acres, get after it. If you have one lot and you want to put a fence around it, that's fine. If you want to put an underground electric cable that keeps that dog in your lot, that's fine too. The issue is that your dog cannot go over to Bid's house and get in the garbage or tear up his yard or carry off things. You know, Grace's slippers cannot disappear into your yard for him to chew on. And so those are the types of complaints that we've gotten. And so, but no, if you have a dog that follows you wherever you go and you go on a walk with your dog, then your dog does not have to be on a leash. If you have a dog that lives inside the house, you know, you do not have to leash him to walk out for him to go to the bathroom, as long as you maintain control of your animal. That was the only purpose of the animal ordinance, was no more dog bites, because that turns into a huge nightmare, trying to get the records of the dog and has it been vaccinated or not, and owners always say yes. We've yet to run into a single dog bite where the owner said, oh, I'm sorry, bummer, I hadn't vaccinated that dog in 5 years, whoops, you know? So they're still working on it, but that really falls under the purview of the sheriff.
So the animal shelter, the county shelter is not operating, right?
Yeah,
It is?
yes, we have 2 animal control officers. If they pick up a dog or a horse or whatever, they take them to the animal shelter.
That's what I was asking. I didn't think it was operating, and I was wondering what happened to the dogs that broke the law outside the city limits.
Nope, that's where they go.
Where is it? Where is it?
It's in Leggett.
One in Lake. Okay.
Yeah, it's in Leggett. It's on precinct 3, barn property. Yeah, it's still right there.
And what's the range of?
You don't want any of the horses that are in there from time to
No,
time.
I'm sure I do.
They're not in good shape.
Range of animals, small to large?
I went in there one day, we had a rabbit, someone's white rabbit, and a few horses that were in pretty bad shape. You know, some cats, so you have kind of a little bit of everything.
They still have capacity there?
Oh, we got tremendous capacity there. Yeah. Now, do we eventually need to do something about it? Yes, sir. We do. Anybody else? Thank you very much.